Brussels in Belgium is considered the de facto capital of the European Union, having a long history of hosting the institutions of the European Union within its European Quarter. The EU has no official capital, and no plans to declare one, but Brussels hosts the official seats of the European Commission, Council of the European Union, and European Council, as well as a seat of the European Parliament. History. Two chances. In 1951, leaders signed the Treaty of Paris, which created the European Coal and Steel Community, and with this new community came the first institutions: the High Authority, Council of Ministers, Court of Justice and Common Assembly. A number of cities were considered, and Brussels would have been accepted as a compromise. But the Belgian government put all its effort into backing Liège, opposed by all the other members, and was unable to formally back Brussels due to internal instability. Agreement remained elusive and a seat had to be found before the institutions could begin work. Hence Luxembourg was chosen as a provisional seat, though with the Common Assembly in Strasbourg, as that was the only city with a large enough hemicycle. This agreement was temporary, and plans were set to relocate the institutions to Saarbrücken, which would serve as a European district. But this did not occur. The 1957 Treaties of Rome established two new communities, the European Economic Community and the European Atomic Energy Community. These shared the Assembly and Court of the ECSC but created two new sets of councils and commissions. Discussions on the seats of the institutions were left till the last moment before the treaties came into force, so as not to interfere with ratification. Brussels waited until only a month before talks to enter its application, which was unofficially backed by several member states. The members agreed in principle to locate the executives, councils and the assembly in one city, though could still not decide which city, so they put the decision off for 6 months. In the meantime, the Assembly would stay in Strasbourg and the new commissions would meet alternatively at the ECSC seat and at the Château of Val-Duchesse. In Brussels, the councils would meet wherever their presidents wanted to. In practice, this was the castle in Brussels until autumn 1958, when it moved to central Brussels, 2 Rue Ravensteinstraat. Early expansion. Brussels missed out in its bid for a single seat due to a weak campaign from the government in negotiations. Despite widespread support from the people, the Belgian government eventually pushed its campaign and started large-scale construction, renting office space in the east of the city for use by the institutions. On the 11th of February 1958, the 6 governments concluded an unofficial agreement on the setting up of community offices, on the principle that it would take 2 years after a final agreement to prepare the appropriate office space. Full services were set up in Brussels in expectation of a report from the Committee of Experts looking into the matter of a final seat. While waiting for the completion of the building on Avenue de la Joyeuse in Tré-Blijdering-Consolaan, offices moved to 51 to 53 Rue Belliard on 1 April 1958, though with the numbers of civil servants rapidly expanding. Services were set up in buildings on Rue des Marais, Broekstraat, Avenue de Brockvillelaan, Avenue de Tervurenlaan, Rue d'Arlon, Arlentstraat, Rue Joseph II, Joseph II Straat, Rue de la Roi, Wetstraat and Avenue de Kortenberglaan. The Belgian government further provided newly built offices on the Mont des Arts, Kunstberg for the Council of Ministers Secretariat and European Investment Bank. A committee of experts deemed Brussels to be the one option to have all the necessary features for a European capital: a large, active metropolis, without a congested centre or poor quality of housing, good communications with other member states' capitals, including to major commercial and maritime markets, vast internal transport links, an important international business centre, plentiful housing for European civil servants, and an open economy. Furthermore, it was located on the border between the two major European civilizations, Latin and Germanic, and was at the center of the first post-war integration experiment. The Benelux. As a capital of a small country, it also could not claim to use the presence of institutions to exert pressure on other member states, it being more of a neutral territory between the major European powers. The committee's report was approved of by the Council, Parliament and Commissions. However, the Council was still unable to achieve a final vote on the issue and hence put off the issue for a further 3 years despite all the institutions now leading in moving to Brussels. The decision was put off due to the varied national positions preventing a unanimous decision. Luxembourg fought to keep the ECSC or have compensation. France fought for Strasbourg, and Italy, initially backing Paris, fought for any Italian city to thwart Luxembourg and Strasbourg. Meanwhile, Parliament passed a series of resolutions complaining about the whole situation of spreading itself across 3 cities. Though unable to do anything about it, the 1965 merger treaty was seen as an appropriate moment to finally resolve the issue. The separate commissions and councils were to be merged. Luxembourg, concerned about losing the high authority, proposed a split between Brussels and Luxembourg. The Commission and Council in the former, with Luxembourg keeping the Court and Parliamentary Assembly, together with a few of the Commission's departments. This was largely welcomed but opposed by France, not wishing to see the Parliament leave Strasbourg, and by Parliament itself, which wished to be with the executives and was further annoyed by the fact it was not consulted on the matter of its own location. Hence, the status quo was maintained with some adjustments. The Commission, with most of its departments, would be in Brussels, as would the Council, but in April, June and October it would meet in Luxembourg. In addition, Luxembourg would keep the Court of Justice, some of the Commission's departments and the Secretariat of the European Parliament. Strasbourg would continue to host Parliament. Joining the Commission was the merged Council Secretariat. The ECSC Secretariat merged with the EECs and EAECs in the Ravenstein building, which then moved to the Charlemagne building, next to the Parlement, in 1971. In Brussels, staff continued to be spread across a number of buildings, on the Rue Belliardstraat, Avenue de la Joyeuse-Intré, Blijdering-Consulaan, Rue du Marais, Broegstraat and at Mont des Arts, Kunstberg. The first purpose-built building was the Parlement building in 1958, designed to house 3,000 officials, which soon proved too small, causing the institution to spread out across the neighborhood. Yet, despite the agreement to host these institutions in Brussels, its formal status was still unclear, and hence the city sought to strengthen its hand with major investment in buildings and infrastructure. However, these initial developments were sporadic with little town planning and based on speculation. However, the 1965 agreement was a source of contention for the Parliament, which wished to be closer to the other institutions. So it began moving some of its decision-making bodies, committee and political group meetings to Brussels. In 1983 it went further by symbolically holding a plenary session in Brussels, in the basement of the Mont des Arts Congress Centre. However, the meeting was a fiasco and the poor facilities partly discredited Brussels' aim of being the sole seat of the institutions. Things looked up for Brussels when Parliament gained its own plenary chamber in Brussels in 1985 for some of its part sessions. This was done unofficially due to the sensitive nature of the Parliament's seat, with the building being constructed under the name of an International Conference Centre. When France unsuccessfully challenged Parliament's half-move to Brussels in the Court of Justice, Parliament's victory led it to build full facilities in Brussels, Edinburgh and the European Council. In response, the Edinburgh European Council of 1992 adopted a final agreement on the location of the institutions. According to this decision, which was subsequently annexed to the Treaty of Amsterdam, although Parliament was required to hold some of its sessions including its budget session, in Strasbourg. Extra sessions and committees could meet in Brussels. It also reaffirmed the presence of the Commission and Council in the city. Shortly before this summit, the Commission moved into the Bradel building. This was due to asbestos being discovered in the Berlaymont, forcing its evacuation in 1989. The Commission threatened to move out of the city, which would have destroyed Brussels' chances of hosting the Parliament. So the government stepped in to build the Bradel building a short distance from the Berlaymont in 23 months, ensuring the Commission could move in before the Edinburgh summit. Shortly after Edinburgh, Parliament bought its new building in Brussels. With the status of Brussels now clear, NGOs, lobbyists, advisory bodies and regional offices started basing themselves in the quarter near the institutions. The council, which had been expanding into further buildings as it grew, consolidated once more in the Justice Lipsius building, and in 2002 it was agreed that the European Council should also be based in Brussels, having previously moved between different cities as the EU's presidency rotated. From 2004 all councils were meant to be held in Brussels. However, some extraordinary meetings are still held elsewhere. The reason for the move was in part due to the experience of the Belgian police in dealing with protesters and the fixed facilities in Brussels. Status: the Commission employs 25,000 people and the Parliament employs about 6,000 people. Because of this concentration, Brussels is a preferred location for any move towards a single seat for Parliament, despite it not formally being the capital of the EU. Some commentators see the fact that Brussels enticed an increasing number of Parliament's sessions to the city, in addition to the main seats of the other two main political institutions, as making Brussels the de facto capital of the EU. Brussels is frequently labelled as the capital of the EU, particularly in publications by local authorities, the Commission and press. Indeed, Brussels interprets the 1992 Agreement on Seats as declaring Brussels as the capital. There are two further cities hosting major institutions, Luxembourg and Strasbourg. Authorities in Strasbourg and organizations based there are also refer to Strasbourg as the capital of Europe and Brussels. Strasbourg and Luxembourg are also referred to as the joint capitals of Europe. In 2010, Vice President of the United States Joe Biden, while speaking to the European Parliament, stated that Brussels, like Washington, D.C., had its own claim to be capital of the free world. Lobbyists and journalists like Washington, D.C., Brussels is a center of political activity with ambassadors to Belgium, NATO and the Union being based in the city, with there being more ambassadors based in the city than in the U.S. capital. There's also a greater number of press corps in Brussels, with media outlets in every Union member state having a Brussels correspondent, and there are 10,000 lobbyists registered. Of the 1,200 accredited journalists in Brussels, 1,000 are from outside Belgium. 120 of these are from Germany alone. However, there has been a disproportionately small representation of US press in Brussels, with very few newspapers having correspondents based in the city. Accessibility: Brussels is located in the urban center of Europe, between Paris, London, Rhine-and-Ruhr, and the Randstad. Via high-speed trains, Brussels is around 1h25 from Paris, 1h50 from London, Amsterdam and Cologne, 3h from Frankfurt. The Eurocap rail project plans to improve Brussels' links to the south to Luxembourg City and Strasbourg. Brussels is also served by Brussels Airport, located in the nearby Flemish municipality of Zaventem, and by the smaller Brussels South Charleroi Airport, located near Charleroi, some 50 kilometers from Brussels.